December 19th, and I detect a quorum. The first item on the agenda is Substitute Bill BL 2017-953, Withers, and the sponsor of the ordinance is here. Excuse me, the bill is here. I have a letter from Councilman Withers asking us to approve this. For purposes of bringing the matter before us, is there a motion on the resolution?
I move the substitute that Councilman Withers is proposing.
Is there a second?
Second.
The sponsor has indicated there is the substitute to the measure. Is there, would the sponsor like to talk to us?
I would. Thank you to the Public Safety Committee for your ongoing collaboration on this constituent-initiated ordinance. Again, just for the viewing audience or for those who may not have been able to join prior discussion, had constituents who had inquired about what are the hours for door-to-door commercial solicitation, and I inquired of Mr. Jameson and learned that there were no hour requirements at all, and so we started out with just a baseline of sunrise to sunset because there were some concerns, number one, from homeowners about having folks run through the yard, knock at the door late at night or after dark. And also, there were concerns about the fact that a lot of times the folks engaged in door-to-door commercial solicitation are quite young themselves, and they didn't want to have them be running around in neighborhoods after dark necessarily either. So the initial proposal was sunrise to sunset. I had some calls from industry folks saying, for several months out of the year, that would mean that they couldn't do any meaningful solicitation. And so we came to a compromise proposal of limiting that to 7 p.m. During those times of the year. And of course, during the summer months when sunrise occurs later, they could still go later in the day. But that would allow, maybe 2 hours or so of meaningful business operations during weekdays. So that was the primary genesis of the bill, was just to establish some hours when folks could expect not to have commercial solicitation at the door. There was also interest from the clerk in updating some of the language for the eligibility requirements. I've had some conversations with the public defender about that, and we're just not at a point where we have agreement on that section, on Section 2, about what that updated language would be. And so we have basically reverted to the way that that language currently reads in the code. So, and Mr. Jameson can clarify if my understanding is incorrect, but basically that just reverts to the existing language for the code while the clerk and the defender continue to look at those requirements. But otherwise, the bill just establishes sunrise until 7 p.m. or sunset, whichever is later, for the hours for commercial solicitation.
Is there any further discussion?
Yeah, I just had a follow-up question. So how do we say that the constituents reported if someone they know to report it to the clerk? How's that information getting out there?
For commercial solicitation purposes, they should have a permit, and so the clerk actually enforces the requirements. So if someone's coming to the door after those hours, they could report it to the clerk. There also can be reports to the police department. They don't necessarily enforce it per se, but I know that in the sense of like they're not going to arrest somebody, but we do have very active neighborhood watch groups sometimes, and so the East Precinct, which is the one that I worked with, is happy to give a drive-by and say, do y'all have a permit, or what are you doing in the neighborhood necessarily, because to try to move people along.
And it's on the website now, the clerk's website?
Once the information is updated, it will be on the clerk's website.
Okay.
Just out of curiosity, if somebody constituent calls MMPD with a complaint, will the police department refer that person to the clerk's office?
I hadn't contemplated that, but I could ask that.
And that's not a legislative issue. That's just simply a matter of letting the police department know that.
If someone were to call dispatch to do that.
Just call the clerk's office after 8 o'clock in the morning.
Is there any further discussion? Then we will call a vote. The ayes, everybody for, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it.
And I'll make a motion that we move the bill as substituted.
Second.
So let's vote on the bill as moved, as substituted. All for?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, passes 4-0. Is there any further business before the committee? Good. Okay, if there's no further business, then Public Safety, Beer, and Regulated Beverages Committee will stand adjourned.
Thank you.